Welcome to our panel discussion, The Future of the Seed Business, Our Contribution to Resilience. My name is Claire Dool. The pandemic has made us realize how vulnerable we all are in our interconnected world. It's put a spotlight on the importance of food security and the need for resilient food systems that can withstand shocks. And we're also facing further shocks from the impact of climate change, a growing population, as well as from biodiversity loss. So how is the seed sector positioning itself to meet some of these challenges? How are some leading companies engaging with the Sustainable Development Goals in terms of feeding the planet and reducing agriculture's greenhouse gas emissions? We're going to be hearing from a wide range of companies: multinational Corteva, family business Semillas Basso, Riksvan, one of the world's leading vegetable breeding companies, and DLF, a global market leader in forage, turf and vegetable seed. But really importantly, we would love to hear from you. So in the live chat, do tell us how you think the seed sector can build resilience in this challenging world. We really do want to hear from you. And of course, if you have questions for our leading companies and leaders, please also put them in the live chat and tweet. You'll be very familiar with it by now because we're on day 3, hashtag ISF Virtual 2021. So how are we going to begin? Well, I'm going to give the floor to each of our speakers to very briefly, a snapshot only, present their businesses to you. So, Truls Damsgaard, CEO of the Danish company DLF, present your company to us.
Thank you, Claire. And I understood I had about a quarter of an hour, right? So DLF is a global seed company, but rooted in Denmark. Quite old roots, I have to say, 150 years almost. I have not been there throughout, but almost. We are about 2,000 staff around the world in 22 countries. 1 in 8 of our staff are involved in research and development, both within the conventional plant breeding as in the sort of new breeding technologies. Our crops are, as you mentioned a moment ago, the forage crops, grasses, legumes, clovers, turf grasses, like what we are playing on at the moment in the European Championship. We are involved in sugar beet seed. We are involved in vegetable seed production, and we are in the potato seed business. If I should round it off and talk about trivial things like money, our top line is about 1 billion euro.
Thank you very much for that. And I knew immediately you'd get in that reference to Euro 2020. This is about football, by the way. It's not about seeds. Let me bring in Lorena Basso, though, who's the CEO of the Argentinian company Semillas Basso. Lorena, welcome. Could you very quickly present your company to us?
Yes, good morning. I'm part of the 24 Hours Seed Company, as Michael said in the opening. It's interesting because when some company in some part of the world turn off the lights, in another part of the world, another turn on. So that is interesting and good. So Semillas Basso is an Argentinian company founded in 1931 by my grandfather, that was an Italian immigrant. We started as an import seed company, and then with the years we became to move into production and breeding. And during the 90s, when we had the wave of merger and acquisitions, our position was like as an import seed company was very risky, so we put all our energy in breeding. So nowadays we are breeding in vegetables, squashes, onion and sweet corn, and as well as popcorn. Popcorn is another line of our business. Argentina is the first export country, and luckily we have more than 60% of the market. We are only 70 employees. We are located in Argentina and in Brazil, We run the company I run the company with my sister, and also my brother is involved in breeding, so that we are a seed family.
Lorena, that's great. And this is the broad range of companies we've got here, from the family businesses like yours to those that are bigger. Let me ask Marco van Leeuwen, Managing Director of the Dutch company Rijkswaan, to present his company to us.
Yes, thank you, Claire. Rijkswaan is a family-owned Dutch company focusing on the breeding of vegetable varieties. We do so in approximately 30 crops and selling seeds of those crops in approximately 120 countries worldwide. We have a team of around 3,500 people worldwide with 30 subsidiaries in several countries in all the continents. And if we talk about numbers, then maybe I should say in the first place that we are founded in 1924. That means that simultaneously with ISF we will celebrate our centenary. And turnover-wise, we are half of the size of DLF. But we will be getting somewhere, but that is not the ultimate aim of our company. The beautiful thing of being active in a family-owned company, in an independent company, is that we have time on our side, and that is very crucial for a breeding company. And it's important also to invest in R&D, so approximately between 25 and 30% of our annual turnover goes into R&D. And sometimes people ask why, but this is to keep pace, in fact, with the technological developments and to remain a player in the market. And the ultimate aim is to remain independent by having all these things in our pocket and being able to play.
And we'll talk about some of that innovation later, because that's going to be very important if we're going to address the challenges that the world is facing. But let me move on to Eric deroyd, Global External Affairs Director of the Swiss agri-science company Corteva. I'm not sure whether you can keep to a minute, given the size of your company, but just try, Eric.
I will try hard. Thanks, Claire, and hi everyone. Our company has 2 years history under the name of Corteva, since we became a pure ag player, 100% dedicated to agriculture 2 years ago, back in 2019. But our company has a long history from its roots and its heritage roots. And actually, we are celebrating this year the 95th anniversary of one of our main seed brands called Pioneer. So we are very proud of this history through our roots. So talking about numbers, about $14 billion sales, quite well balanced, 50-50 between the two main platforms that we have, which are seeds and crop protection. But we are also quickly developing our third business platform around digital products and digital services for the farmers. At the intersection of our seed and crop protection business platforms, we are also quickly developing our seed applied technologies platform and business, where we aim to provide the seed companies all around the globe with a unique portfolio of solutions to protect the seeds against the biological agents, insect and disease, but also biostimulant. The company purpose statement is to enrich the lives of who produce and those who consume, ensuring progress for generations to come. So this statement animates, unifies our 20,000+ employees around the globe, and it well describes the fact that farmers are the center of what we do, but we also highlight the importance of understanding the consumer needs and try to meet the consumer needs trends for the future to also help our farmers. We are an R&D company with more than $1 billion investment in R&D per year, 150 R&D facilities all around the globe, and our purpose statement also indicate that being an R&D company with a lot of R&D capabilities, we also have the responsibility to ensure that these technologies are representing a progress for the society and for the farmers who buy our products. We operate globally, as the colleagues here, with sales in about 140 countries, and on the seed side specifically, the vast majority of our operation are around a few arable crops, such as corn, soybean, and oilseeds, like sunflower and oilseed rapeseed. But we do also operate in many other crops through either our own breeding or through licensing of traits and biotechnologies to other companies.
Thank you. you. Well, we'll dig a bit deeper into the business in a moment, but let's look at resilience and the pandemic. And I'm just going to ask for two views here, perhaps from two corners of the globe. So, Lorena, I'll come to you in a moment, but let me start with Marco. The pandemic, it was a shock. What did it do to your company? What did it do to the food system? And what did you learn?
In the first place, we learned a lot. In an incredible short period, we had to adapt our way of working, going from physical to virtual. And that's pretty complicated for companies like us working with physical material, right, with seeds. And seeds are a living thing. We need to be with our farmers. We need to be in the seed supply chain. And all these things in March last year did come to a standstill. I think we were lucky, and also we had worked it out pretty quickly with the seed associations, that seed and agriculture were seen pretty soon as a vital part of the economy. And that opened again some doors and lanes that were closed before. And then we could pick up our work again, our work of doing breeding trials, ensuring seed productions, taking care of the seed supply chain and delivering to farmers. But with a lot of challenges, right? So challenges in the sense of government issues, governments tending more to secure their own food on the short term by going completely for local, which maybe for the short term is a nice and interesting idea, but it is not helping to resist shocks and stresses. On the contrary, I would say. And there were also a lot of challenges in the sense of getting access to labor in a secure and safe manner in order to make sure that we could continue the work. Now we managed, I think most of the companies managed, but of course we are very much looking forward to the back to the somewhat old normal.
What would you say was the big lesson learned?
Yeah, I think the possibilities of meeting each other virtually worldwide. But I think the biggest lesson for society was our dependency on seed. And that was also a kind of gift with this pandemic that we got from anywhere, that people started to realize the importance of seed and the importance of seed for agriculture and for food production. And here and there that also stimulated vegetable consumption, plant consumption, and that in the end is also good for the business.
Lorena, let me bring you in because, of course, Argentina is going through a very difficult period with a second wave at the moment. So I'm wondering how that is impacting your company and whether there were any lessons learned from the first wave in terms of resilience.
Okay, thank you, Claire. Now we are working with a lot of protocols, but the hard work was last year. The pandemic or the COVID got in Argentina in March, and we were in the middle of the harvest in the central area and in the middle of the planting in the north area. So it was very difficult. Argentina is a federal country, so the restrictions about movement of goods, people, technical people, and everything between one province and the other was very difficult. So after many months, a lot of conversation with the public area, we have doing a lot in protocols. So after that, we start moving a little easier because what we think is no one had to be in risk. That was very important. But at the end, we could send our seed for planting in Argentina in the north, for planting in the north hemisphere. So that was very important. So for me, the big learning is that we feel that seed sector is important. It's very important for the food supply. So our challenge was to ensure the seed to be planted in the correct time to ensure the food. So I think that is very important for our area to know the importance of the seed sector.
Truls.
Just one thing, building a little bit on what have been said. I mean, the people working in the offices and so on were very fast to adapt, I would say, also because of the electronic opportunities. What was very important for us was to ensure that our people working in the factories were able to ship the seed because they couldn't stay home. They had to show up and work every day, and it was in the peak of the season, and the seed needed to be at the farmer at the right time. So, I mean, I have the real heroes, I have to say here, and not everybody will be happy about that, but that were those people that were there physically every day for long days at the peak of the season. Mm-hmm. And actually, we did a survey following this just a couple of months ago, and we got very good response about that also, how we tried to protect our staff.
Yeah, the essential workers. I think we all saw that during the pandemic. So lessons learned
Claire,
from
may I add something to this? Because this, I think we all need to realize that this was exactly the reason why Euro 2020 is taking place this month, because a lot of those people from DLF supplied seeds for those beautiful pitches. And this is, I think, also why...
He's become a spokesperson for DLF suddenly.
And this is also why, I know you are not Gary Lineker, but this is also why Denmark is playing in the semi-finals tonight. Because they had a competitive advantage there.
Potentially, but just remember, Britain needs a bit of a booster at the moment. Let's try and get back to seed, even though everybody will be watching that match on DLF turf this evening. What I was just thinking is lots of lessons learned, but if we go back to the opening ceremony, there was Peter Backer, the CEO of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. And what he said, well, we've got this triple challenge. We've got the food security, which we've been talking about. We've got climate change. We've got alarming rates of biodiversity loss. So how are companies going to position themselves for these triple challenges? And he said there will be some winners and losers. So let me just ask Eric, how are you going to position yourself to make sure that you're on the winning side, to try and use a bit of a football metaphor there?
Well, I think we have to embrace all of those challenges because our customers, the farmer, have to. So we need to accompany them in these multiple factor challenges that you mentioned, right? So continue producing the quantity, the quality, the diversity of food that the consumers and the growing population need, but at the same time address some other issue that came up more recently on the top of their agenda, right? So the climate change, etc., biodiversity, water, etc. So the way to address that is to embrace it holistically and focus on innovation, because it's probably now certain there's not going to be one magic solution, but the solution will come from a panel of tools, products, services, but also help the farmers to better use those different technologies and tools that they have at their disposal. So really this holistic approach is what we are focusing on to ensure that we support our customers.
Well, let's look at innovation. Marco, in your sphere, there's a lot of talk, of course, about improved varieties, some of them for nutrition, some of them for taste, some of them for climate change. But the issue, as we know from our Access to Seeds Index, is that only 10% of farmers around the world get them. So a double-headed question, and perhaps to everybody else also on the panel, is what are you doing in terms of innovation for, say, climate-resistant seeds, but more importantly, how are you going to improve the access?
I think answering the first part of your question, what we are doing is screening and breeding varieties and screening varieties for adverse climatical conditions, breeding for resistances. So a big chunk of our annual R&D budget goes into this direction. And of course, we do that also then in emerging countries. We have to be there. We have to anticipate to the circumstances that are basically that we see there. And then, I mean, we are only halfway. We have bred varieties, but then we have to make sure that seeds can be transported, can be sold into those countries, that also very remote farmers have access to those seeds. And this is where, in a lot of countries, the problem starts, right? We need enabling policies. We have seen also that we need free movement of seeds under, of course, regulatory systems that are there in specific countries and regions. But we cannot go country by country. Seeds need to move globally. And enabling policies, not only for the seed industry, but also for farmers and for other farm input suppliers, are crucial to make sure that what we breed is finally also reaching the farmer.
And if we look at perhaps enabling policies, it would be good to get an idea of what would be an enabling policy for you that would help that movement, Marco.
There are some countries where there are no systems for variety registration or no systems for the authorization of seed treatments. So there is insecurity whether certain characters, certain varieties with certain traits, certain seed treatments can be imported into countries. That's one example. The other example might be a system where innovation is protected, like the plant breeders' rights system. And as long as you do not have systems like this in place, it makes it complicated for companies to get started and to bring in their newest innovations into those countries. Whereas we have the material, the varieties ready to be supplied, to be delivered. So these are just two examples, Claire, and there are many more.
Yes, let me go to Eric and then to Truls about the enabling policies that you would like.
Policies that regulate the approvals of the technologies or the seeds for cultivation in the country. So that needs to really be unlocked, because there's still many places in the world where it's not working. So there's this piece of the access to the seeds technologies, really is approval for the cultivation. That's really an element important. There's another element to the access is also ability to demonstrate to those farmers. I'm thinking here particularly the smallholder farmers, the benefits of those technologies. So there's also here a big action for the seed companies like us to train and show and showcase the technologies. And so I think all of us have very large programs to train farmers, particularly smallholder farmers around the globe, about the value and the benefits that those seeds technology can bring to their families, to their communities. So that's one element. That's on the seed side. But also we also need to make sure that the farmer then, when we produce these quality crops, they have also, because many of them are depending on that for the local consumption, but they also need to export those crops externally of the country or outside of the country. There's also other type of policies around the trade of the commodities, which is today also something that we could see some improvement in a certain level of harmonization of these trade policies around the globe for authorization of exporting those crops, but also a certain level of maybe synchronization of the approvals, because we see today that even if policies will be harmonized, if you have an asynchronous approval, that creates also another issues for the farmer to access the seed, not because they don't have logistically access to it, but because they cannot sell the product they produce with it. So that's another key policy area where we need to also focus.
Truls, for you, what enabling policies would help? You know, are you like Marco? You say you've got the seeds, but the issue is getting the access.
I actually think Marco and Eric have covered that extremely well. If I should be very practically, I think the pandemic has made the world become more protectionistic. So whilst I think we are all pretty good at trying to reach out to our potential customers, there are policies in countries that are going the wrong way. And in all the challenges we have, we need free movement of seed, we need market access, we don't want too many sort of hindrances on the way. And that is what has developed both politically and also in other ways the last year and a half. So I think also for an association like ISF, there's an extremely important topic to take on here to make sure that we unlock those opportunities again. And this is pretty down to earth, but difficult to deal with because it's quite political. And that's something that companies have got a challenge to fix themselves. So an association like ISF is extremely important here. And if I may just add one thing on the research side of things, what can we do? Because I mean, the challenge is to produce a lot more, and the climate changes, climatic conditions are getting worse. And we actually believe that to focus on the roots of the crops, to build longer, stronger, and bigger root mass is going to be essential to satisfy all those demands. And it's something that we are doing in most of our crops and have been focusing on for the last 5 to 7 years. And I think that's an area where you can really see that there's a clear connection between root mass development and performance above ground. And obviously we are more interested in what's above the ground than below, but it's closely related.
Let me bring in Lorena there, because Lorena, here in the studio, concern about protectionism in trade policies. Now, you wear a number of hats. You're the CEO of your family business, but you're also president of the Argentinian Seed Association, and I understand also a regional trade seed association. So is this one of the negative consequences of the pandemic, that you're seeing protectionism and trade tariffs in the your seed business?
Yes, I don't know if because the pandemic, maybe the pandemic put this issue deeply. I think that we need to move seed. We need to move seed from the research seed from one place to another, and the commercial seed. So, as Marco said, I think that we have to move globally. We have to move to have the registrations in every country easy to do. We need phytosanitary measures based on science. So it's very important that we think that we have to move seeds, so have to be easy. We have a very important role in ensure the food system, so seeds are essential to be moved.
Understood. Rose, also I know that in your area of the world there's a lot of focus on consumers and they're very focused on taste and nutrition. So how is your company responding to that?
Yes, it's interesting. I'm talking about, I think that a good example is about the squashes, because we have a breeding program in squashes. Mostly we focus on local consumption. So for us, it's very easy to contact our customers or consumers. So because of that, we have a clear idea about what they need, what quality they are looking for. I talking about the color. I talking about the taste. I talking about the flavor. Everything. We are in extremely contact with them. So then, when we have the requirement, we go to breeding and do what we have to do to improve and to give them the best answer. But regarding production, because we have to think in production, our challenge is to solve the problems of our farmers or growers, doing production that with our seed as simple as we can. And this production and this seed have to improve a friendly production in terms of environment and good yield. Good yield is very important for us. We have to ensure fair return for the growers and fair prices for the consumers. So we take care of quality, of course. We take care about yield in a fair balance. I think that we have to think in different ways.
Understood. One of the points that I remember Peter Backer made in the opening ceremony was the importance of all actors in the food chain, the food sector and the seed sector working together. So perhaps over to you, Eric. Where are the tensions in that value chain between the seed sector and the food sector? Because you've all made the point that the seed sector, it's all about the farmers, mostly, I would say. Of course, the food sector, it's about the consumers. So where are the tensions in that value chain?
Well, first of all, I would say there should not be tensions, right? Because these companies should work together, right? So we are part of the entire food system. So we should not be any tension there. We should all be animated by the same objective.
But are you?
So now to your point, the tensions will come, for me, in two aspects. Maybe one is, it's true that the consumer may have sometimes requirements that they translate to the food companies because they are the front line to the consumers, which are then translated back to the ag supply. And those challenges and those requirements are sometimes real technical challenges.
Such as
produce without pesticides, for example, or produce without GMOs in certain situations, or produce with a lot of requirements that sometimes are scientifically based, sometimes not scientifically based, which are then translated back to the early stage of the system, which are the farmers and then ultimately the seed companies. So that's a challenge when these requirements are difficult to address technically. So but as innovation companies, most of the seed companies are innovation companies. We are eager to tackle the challenge, right, and to put the investment and the effort into it. So sometimes we are just asking for a little bit more time. That's probably one conflict which is intrinsically linked to what the consumer is asking. Another conflict is probably here more on sometimes the narrative that the food companies may be tempted to use with the consumers when they are not scientifically based or science-based, which is a little bit potentially a conflict with the ag sector, the supply side of the ag sector, including the seed companies, which are extremely scientifically sounded and based on science. This is what we do every day. So sometimes when we receive or see requirements or we see positioning on statements from the food industry which are not really scientifically sounded, it's also maybe potentially another conflict. But here again, I just want to finish by saying that we should not be conflict. We should be able to address that because we are all addressing the same ultimate goal, which is to produce enough food for the growing population. So
that's really interesting. What you're saying is that the seed sector is science-based. What you're very diplomatically saying is that the food sector is sometimes their marketing departments go into overdrive, selling the consumer something that they may or may not want. And I think what was interesting in the discussion that I had on Monday with Peter Backer was he made the statement that the seed sector and food sector has very low public trust. Now, it may be because of some of the things we've mentioned. You've also referred to GMOs. If we take that as a premise that is out there, especially in the lead up to the UN Food Systems Summit, let me ask everybody, what can you do to try and regain or build further that trust? Mm-hmm.
Well, first of all, I'm not sure it's only the seed companies. I think it's corporations in general. And we are seeing more and more now for the last 1 or 2 decades that even the regulatory bodies, the regulatory agencies are also losing trust from the public opinion. You can see that negatively in the sense of it's a lack of trust. So it's kind of worrying if nobody trusts anymore the institutions in place. We can see that also positively by maybe it's also a request from the consumer to be more active in their own choices and to control more their destiny and how they want to solve the issue that they want to address. So it's also a more balanced approach, maybe particularly for the younger generation, which we start to see that a lot. So on the trust, really one path that we are exploring very actively as Corteva since we've been created is the transparency. So being transparent on what we do, how we do things is becoming crucial for companies like us, because part of the trust is also because the people want to know what they buy, but they want also to know how this product has been created and made. So making full transparency on the process to create and make those products is for us essential. And we created a website, for example, where we have a directory of our seeds where we share with public how those seeds have been created and developed in full transparency. So I think as a secondary effect, we also believe it will help the regulators and the policymakers to come with more outcome-based policies rather than being prescriptive on how the things should be made, but more be outcome-based on what the objective they want to achieve from a public authority, and then we can develop the tools to do that. If we combine that with full transparency, we hope that the public acceptance will come with it.
What do you think, Marco, needs to be done on public acceptance? It's a public that's more demanding, just as Eric is saying. They want to really know how the food was made.
I think in the first place, Claire, we should not ignore it and we should not fight against it. It's a matter of fact, it's out there. It's a quest for transparency. We have to deal with it. But then let's also really deal with it, right? And be transparent, building bridges, organizing stakeholder dialogues. Because I think, and sometimes we use the example of an oyster, I think this industry sometimes closes the oyster a little bit too often and too much. And we should also not be afraid of inviting people with different opinions to our tables in our companies, explaining what we are doing. I think, but of course I'm utterly biased, we do great work. We are at the foundation of food supply. We make use of what is available in nature. Let's go out there and tell that story.
But why is that story not getting across? No. Why? I mean, Peter Bakker, he's got the whole private sector that he is trying to get together ahead of this UN Food Systems Summit, and he says there's low public trust. So it seems that somehow these stories are not getting out there.
No, I think we are not telling them enough, and we are also maybe not open enough to invite stakeholders with really different opinions. And we are a bit scared there in that sense. We are not used to being exposed in this way. But I think in society, this is the direction we have to go. Because as Eric said, we have the same vision to supply the world with sufficient food in a fair, sustainably produced manner. The only debate that we have is how to get there. Oh, we can solve that.
So, yes, Eric, were you wanting to say, and then Truls? Yes.
One analysis of that, why it is happening, and it's happening in our sector. It's probably happening also in all the highly regulated sectors. Why? Because for decades we have been highly regulated, so the main conversation had to happen with these companies and the regulators into a kind of a vacuum discussion where we're highly regulated, and then you convince the farmers to use technology. So the highly regulated industries like seeds, for example, or crop protection, or other sectors also have been used to work with this kind of vacuum conversation. We are not been used to in the past decades to open up to the public and to the consumer because of that reason. That's not an excuse, but that's probably a reason for the situation we are to deal today.
Truls.
You're talking about regulators, as you do, Eric. I think the consumers, they're the most important regulators, and we have not really realized that till now. And I mean, communication is so easy, and young consumers are extremely well informed, so they know exactly what they want. So I think for an association for the seeds industry, we need to address the consumers much more. Maybe we have spent too much time on regulators, and they are extremely good, and they know our industry, and they are good to deal with, and they are science-based. The consumers are not all that science-based. So I think we need to change a little bit our focus here.
Well, that's interesting, and it may be also because we have strong statistics. So let's look at this one, which is that agriculture systems are directly responsible for 25% of greenhouse gas emissions. So let's try and see whether we can get a good story out there in your answers. Truls, what are you doing to help farmers reduce their carbon footprint?
Just to focus on one thing, we believe that our crops, they are perennial crops, so they live in the ground for several years. They contribute positively to the carbon balance. So we think that those crops actually can contribute a lot going forward to building carbon in the soil. And then the new thing that we believe will be the interesting dynamics in the years to come is from those crops you can actually produce very green protein, something that has not really happened in the past. So we think producing green protein from perennial crops like grasses, legumes, clovers can change this in quite a lot of countries throughout the world. In a way that, I mean, it takes a lot of development and work and so on, but ultimately we think that that will happen.
And just following up on that, because your seed goes to your grass seed goes to the animal industry, and we can see here the trend in Europe and the US is for less meat consumption.
Yeah.
Are you going to have to switch your business so that you are producing more plant-based crops?
Actually, we are seeing in Europe that the beef consumption is dropping with 1% per year. So it's not the end of the world, but Marco is smiling because he can see those guys eating more vegetables, which is fair enough. But obviously it's changing. And what we are looking at ultimately is that the green proteins produced from those crops can also be suitable for human consumption. If I would rather have a steak than eat sort of green proteins, maybe, but I think ultimately we will see a change here.
Marco, what are you doing to help reduce the carbon footprint of agriculture, which is high?
Yeah, that's for us as a company focusing on the a little bit higher end of the vegetable market, a bit difficult to say. A lot of our products are produced in greenhouses, and growers owning those greenhouses try to be climate neutral, and they take all kinds of measures to be as responsive as possible to this question. So what we do worldwide is we collaborate with our farmers and other farm input suppliers in the direction of producing out of soil, so producing on substrate, producing with drip irrigation to reduce the water use. We are working on programs towards hydroponic cultivation, so cultivation on water. And that massively reduces the agricultural footprint, basically. On top of that, there are also ongoing investments towards indoor production to carve out climatical adverse conditions, reducing also the need to use crop protection products, and ensuring that customers get a clean product which they can buy. So this is basically the contribution that we are delivering. So it's capacity building, it's teaming up, and of course at the foreground breeding resistant varieties against all those conditions.
Lorena, with your hat on as the president of the Argentinian Seed Association and Regional Seed Association, what are you doing at that level to help farmers reduce their carbon footprint?
Yes, Claire, at national level, I'm talking about the government, they have the firm commitment to achieve carbon neutrality for 2050. From the National Seed Association, we are part of the Argentinian Carbon Neutral Program, which objective of goal is to work on the determination of the carbon footprint and the implementation of good practices guideline for all crops. Nowadays, is complete the program for soybean, and now we are working for corn and wheat. At the same time, all the provinces, the producing provinces had implementation in good practices guidelines that cover processing, that cover harvesting and post-harvesting. So most of these practices we are doing for a long time, just to share our no-till that is very important in Argentina. We are doing precision planting, especially in the seed sector, and circular economy practices also. And for us, crop rotation and cover crops are essential. So we are doing a lot. We have a lot to do. But I think that we have to put a lot of energy in training and to show, because we need that the grower and the farmer understand that it's very important for the future. We need to take care of our place, our soil, our environment. So we have a lot to do, but I think that in our country and in our area, we are going in the best way.
Thank you. We've got some questions coming in. So let me take a question from Bangladesh, which is asking, how much are companies investing towards sustainability and resilience in terms of percentage of turnover? Marco, do you have that figure at hand?
As I said in the beginning, we invest 25 to 30% of our annual turnover in R&D, and the majority goes into breeding resilient varieties. And not in the last place also for emerging markets. I don't have by heart the numbers for specific countries, but we are, for example, having a huge program in Africa and Tanzania where we are employing 500 people developing varieties for Eastern African conditions. We have similar setups also in other countries. But to say exactly or to give you exactly a number, that's that's difficult, but it's a lot and it's going to be more.
Eric.
I'll probably go a little bit in the same direction. I would probably, with no joke, say that 100% of what we invest is for sustainable agriculture. Sustainability is part of what we do, is part of what we've been doing for decades. It's true, it's now there's new criteria for sustainability that are coming up that we're going to embrace now. So we're just going to adapt and modify our criteria for innovation, our criteria for investment. But sustainability has always been part of what we do. So I would say 100%. We do that also on our traditional work and expertise like the seed, and I will concur with what has been said today, for example, on the carbon, producing seed varieties that will be tackling the carbon issue a little bit more, but more productivity is important. We also do that with all the accompanying techniques to help the farmers when they grow the seeds to have the better fertilization to reduce the carbon emission or the greenhouse gas emission from the fertilization is also a key element of us. But we also now invest on new species. That's probably also the part of the question is how much do you invest in a new species that are not traditional investment that we were doing, for example, on digital solutions to help the farmer to monitor the practices they are putting in place that enable them to sequestrate more carbon and reduce. We need those monitoring tools so then the farmers will be able to get remunerated and compensated for the action they do, especially as the carbon will become a carbon market. So those investments are also as critical as what we do already and what we have been doing for many years. So just wanted to make that element here.
Sure. Let me perhaps direct a question here to you, Marco, because you were talking about the movement of seed right at the beginning of this discussion. And what is the call of the private seed sector to international organizations such as WTO and FAO to ease seed transport and movement for food security around the whole world?
I was super happy to hear in the previous session that Mrs. Doha called for the seed sector to actively participate in the discussion on trade. So I think also here what we need to do is we need to get out there and raise our voices and make our points clear and to really become part of the debate. And we have to be a little bit more forward-looking, outside-looking here. So in that sense, I would say we also have a responsibility to step towards, proactively towards those organizations and explain better what we need and why we need it.
Eric, do you have a specific call to WTO and FAO?
The specific request we have, which I think will be very much aligned with the seed industry in general and what the ISF declaration to the UN Food System Summit, for example, has been issued recently. The request for the food policies, the ag policies, the guidance from those organizations is to be outcome-based. give us the objective of what we are trying to accomplish. It can be very specific on certain sustainability agenda or certain things. Give us the objectives and the metrics to measure the progress that we, the private sector, but also the public sector, is doing for innovation. So give us the objective instead of being unilaterally or arbitrarily constraining the tools that we can use for achieving that goal. So don't go too quick to the assumption of dictating what are the tools that we can use to achieve these goals. The second element, and I think they are, but we need to remind everybody all the time, is keep the farmer at the center of everything, of the regulation, because there's not going to be any success here in anything without the farmers being at the center of that. So we need to value and acknowledge the contribution that they have, and without them, we're not going to do anything. So that's probably a second ask.
Truls, yes,
okay.
I'll bring in Truls because he was agreeing when you were saying that there was
please,
too much prescription. But make your third point, and then we'll come to Truls.
Market forces. Incentive the market forces to incentive the demand side of the market, to incentive the farmers to adopt new technologies, even to compensate them for adopting new technologies. Also put policies that influence the consumers' behaviors that will then backstage influence the way we produce, instead of having again constraint on the supply side, work on the market forces that kind of modify or adjust the demand side of this food ecosystem. That's also the third big pillar that we are asking, or this is our ask for the policymakers.
Sure. Truls.
I think the narrative has to be very much around resource efficiency. If it's our plant breeding or if it's what the farmer is doing as a crop, that what we are breeding towards is resource efficiency, because we will need to deliver higher output, growing population and so on, as you said. So the crops and the plants that we are promoting, they need to be extremely resource efficient. There can be no nitrogen leaching. The waterways need to be kept clean and all those things. And those will be constraints that will be important to our industry. So when we develop our research programs, we need to have that in mind. And exactly as you say, Eric, if we are then sort of regulated up front and not on the output, it will just be a limiting factor in what we can deliver.
And is this where you say that you're being over-regulated? Is this the EU Green Deal we're talking about, with the reduction of pesticides by 50% use and risk by 2050, I think?
Yeah. Well, again, glass half full, half empty, right? So the EU Green Deal and many other Green Deals around the planet, right? It's not only the EU. In some extent is, yes, a little bit prescriptive on certain elements, right? They mention, 50% pesticide risk reduction and risk reduction, 25% organic land in Europe. As the industry, we are questioning where are those numbers coming from, and have we made the full assessment of what's the unintended consequences of that on other elements of the sustainability agenda, okay? Food security, trade, etc. That's a question. If you see the glass half full, there's also a lot of other elements which are not prescriptive yet. So there's still hope here that they will still be outcome based on certain other elements. So we are watching and looking at, and we are also very much willing to participate to the debate on how we're going to implement those goals of the Green Deal, the Farm to Fork, or some other Green Deals around the planet in the future. So we are open for conversation.
Marco, one other question from the audience, and then I'll ask for some concluding remarks from everybody. Marco, what are the seed companies looking for in terms of partnership with the public sector in developing agricultural countries? I thought this one was a good for you because you're saying we're too internal as an industry. We need to open up and tell the world what we're doing. So what are you looking for in terms of partnership with the public sector?
No, I think we have to realize that the seed sector plays an important role, but we are only one element in a lot of components that are needed for farmers to deliver towards sustainable food systems. So we have to team up, we have to partner, and organizations like this, public partnerships, offer a great platform to bring all those groups together and to be a kind of catalyst for sustainable development. Without that, it's very difficult, because we all want something, and that is sometimes also a frustration in my company and personally. We have an idea, we have the means, we have the know-how, but we lack basically the mass. We lack the partners to get it out there, and that is, I think, where we have to work upon.
Last remarks, and I'm going to ask for 30 seconds for each of you. You all as companies have signed the ISF Seed Declaration, committing to various key SDG goals, which of course the agenda for that is the 2030 agenda. So let me ask each company, starting with Lorena, what's your vision for your company for 2030?
Okay, first of all, I would like to share that for me it's important to that all the companies and the academy and the public sector work together. We need to build a virtuous knowledge network, and that is very important. So that I wanted to share. But in terms of Semilla Basso, I think that this 2030 looks future, but is in the next second. So for us, the most important is that when the grower want to choose a seed, choose for our seed. So what we want is his first choice have to be Basso. That for me is very important to think in our brand in the first time. So, but there is another issue. I work in Argentina.
If I could ask you to be brief, because otherwise we're running out of time. So in a couple of words.
Sorry. I want to say that for me, the most important is to keep giving our employees the work. Because in Argentina, where the political and economical conditions are all time changing, that is very hard. So for us, the resilience that is the world in this corner is very important. It's our ADN. So that is, I want to keep my employees with their works.
Okay.
Thank you.
A sentence from Eric, a sentence from Marco, and I think I know what the sentence is going to be from Truls.
The vision for us will be obviously to execute the purpose statement that I mentioned at the introduction of this meeting, and really be able to be seen as a partner of choice for the farmers, and to enable them to deliver on their goals for producing food, but also meeting the consumer agenda, but also be seen for the policymakers and all the food chain, the food value chain, as a trusted partner for that, including the seed companies with our seed treatment platform. But if I have a dream, is really that we will be seen as a solution provider, holistic solution provider to the farmers, for them to appear as the solution and not the problem to the sustainable agenda that we have for a resilient food system.
Thank you. Marco, your 2030 vision.
Yeah, well, it's I hope we can and will remain an important partner for all farmers in the world in making accessible high-quality seeds of their choice, and therewith also contributing to world food supply and not excluding any person on this planet. So this is also about inclusiveness, and if we can contribute a little bit there, then we will be fine.
Truls.
So, first of all, as Lorena said, what's happening in 2030, if we talk plant breeding, it needs to be something that we are cooking on now. Otherwise, it won't happen in 2030. So I think that's also why it's so important we have this discussion. For us, I mean, we have new things that we really hope will come to fruition in 2030 before is about the green proteins. And ultimately also that we are using green proteins as human consumption directly. That's our dream. And then another, that's not in 2030, but that's in the next few days, of course, that it will go very well for the Danish team playing soccer, and that all the future soccer tournaments will be played on DLF turf.
Well, I do hope that all future tournaments will be played on DLF turf. About the outcome of that match, perhaps I should diplomatically say, I hope the best side wins. So thank you to our audience for their very informed questions and engagement, and to our 4 speakers from around the world for sharing their vision and contribution of the seed sector to building resilience, as we certainly do face huge food security and environmental challenges. Thank you very much.